As President-elect Donald Trump puts it, until the world, quote, comes to its senses, the idea of nuclear expansion is on the table. In a statement on Twitter, Trump said on Thursday, "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes." The remarks seem to echo what Russian President Vladimir Putin, whose government has indicated it's willing to work with the incoming Trump administration, said earlier in the day.
We need to strengthen the military potential of strategic nuclear forces, especially with missile complexes that can reliably penetrate any existing and prospective missile defense systems.
On the international stage, Vladimir Putin has been center stage in 2016, and today he shared his view of the world with the world's media. Putting a question to the president isn't easy when there are 1,000 of you and just one of him. But he agreed to take my question. Mr. President, your country has been accused of state-sponsored hacking with the aim of influencing the results of the US presidential election. And President Obama revealed that he told you personally to cut it out. So what did you tell him in response? The president refused to say, dismissing all the talk of hacking as sour grapes from the Democratic Party.
The losing side always tries to pass the buck. They would do better to look for the problems among themselves.
Russia, said President Putin, was modernizing its nuclear missile potential. But he claimed he wasn't worried by Donald Trump's tweet yesterday pledging to boost America's nuclear capability. Are you not concerned, though, that there is a danger of a new arms race if America is talking about boosting its nuclear arsenal?
The basis for a new arms race was there already after the US pulled out of the anti-ballistic missile treaty and started to create a missile shield. So either we had to build our own shield or, as we're doing, develop weapons to penetrate theirs. But this wasn't our choice.
Vladimir Putin made it clear today that if there is to be a new arms race, that won't be Russia's fault. And he delivered a defiant message that Russia is stronger than any potential aggressor.
The Assad regime cannot slaughter its way to legitimacy.
On Tuesday, Russia stated that the U.S. decision to reduce restrictions on arming Syrian rebels would open the way for deliveries of shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles and would directly threaten Russian forces in Syria. Maria Zakharova, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, said that the policy change easing restrictions on weapons supplies had been set out in a new U.S. defense spending bill and that Moscow had regarded the step as a hostile act. The annual defense policy bill was signed into law last week by U.S. President Barack Obama, who had been sharply critical of Russia's intervention in Syria.
On Wednesday, South Carolina GOP Senator Lindsey Graham said that the country of Russia and its president, Vladimir Putin, should expect tough sanctions after alleged cyber attacks during the recent presidential election. Earlier in December, GOP and Democratic senators, including Graham, called for a bipartisan panel to investigate cyber attacks against the U.S. by foreign countries, with a particular focus on Russia's efforts to influence the U.S. election. While on a visit to the Baltics with fellow Republican Senator John McCain Wednesday, Graham added there will be bipartisan sanctions coming that will hit Russia hard, particularly Putin as an individual. It is now time for Russia to understand enough is enough.
The US and Russia at odds in the United Nations, a familiar scene not just in recent months, but through decades. The leader of what was then the Soviet Union launches another attack on Western powers in the General Assembly, head of a communist empire striving to be a dominant power, striding ahead in the space race, developing an overwhelming stockpile of nuclear weapons, and as part of Cold War expansion sending troops into Afghanistan. But the strength of Afghan resistance undermined the Soviet myth of unmatchable power and depleted diminishing state coffers. A new US president and his futuristic Star Wars missile defense system further challenged the Soviets to increase their military spending. He was joined by a trusted ally who gave permission for US cruise missiles to be deployed on UK soil. And a former Polish priest became the third member of the anti-Soviet alliance. Pope John Paul II's trip back to his native Warsaw in 1979 galvanized the labor movement as revolution spread throughout Eastern Europe. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, a literal confirmation that the Soviet communist system had crumbled. The policies of glasnost, or openness, and perestroika restructuring introduced by President Mikhail Gorbachev played their role in destroying the system they were designed to rebuild. Hardline communists took to the streets in a last-ditch effort to save the USSR, but were repulsed by crowds with a controversial figure of Boris Yeltsin in the lead. In a televised address, Mikhail Gorbachev stepped down as Soviet president. The old system collapsed before the new one had time to begin working, he said. And the Soviet flag that had flown over the Kremlin for more than 7 decades was lowered. A month later, the man who had become president took the seat of Russia in the UN Security Council for the first time.
His Excellency Vladimir Putin.
On the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, it was Vladimir Putin who spoke as a leader of what had once again become a nation competing for dominance on the global stage.
The Iranian Army's Air Defense Forces kicked off the first phase of massive defensive drills across the southern belt of the country.
The aerial maneuver covers an area of 500,000 square kilometers from the southeast to the southwest of Iran, the coast of the Persian Gulf and some of its islands. It aims to expand radar, missile and communication systems as well as multi-layered electronic warfare to over 900 locations.
The aerial maneuvers are conducted by the Khatam Air Defense Headquarters. Iran's most sensitive and busiest aerial corridors are located in that region, which covers southern, southeastern, and southwestern provinces. The exercises basically aim to improve effective coordination between the air defense systems run by the Iranian Army and the Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, or the IRGC. During the first phase of the drills, new domestically made defense systems will undergo extensive tests. The ability of each separate aerial region to defend the country independently and the operational capabilities of a young airman will be reviewed. Just to go over some of the details that were disclosed for us to enable the elimination of the aircraft, which transpired in under just a second. The apparatus had to be operated in tandem with the Ufuk Horizon, or the Airborne Fire Control Radar, the AFCR. The Talosh missile system and Ufuk Fire Control Radar were also tested for the first time on the third day of the maneuvers taking place on Wednesday in south of Iran.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused the U.S. of supporting ISIS in Syria, saying he had photos and video to prove it. Besides ISIS, he also called out the U.S. support of groups of Kurdish fighters like the YPG. But the problem here is the YPG has been one of the most successful groups in the fight against ISIS. It's complicated though. Turkey considers the YPG a terrorist group, but the West disagrees. Erdogan's claim about ISIS could be a way for him to express his disappointment in President Obama's policies in Syria. One analyst told Al Jazeera, Turkey believes that the Obama administration does not have the capability to hurt Turkey at this point. Erdogan himself has been accused of aiding ISIS in the past. As of Wednesday morning, Turkey hadn't released any of that evidence it claims to have. The U.S. described the accusation as ludicrous.
Today, I also had a telephone conversation with Tunisian President Beji Qaed Essebsi. We discussed all aspects of our relationship. Germany and Tunisia have considerably intensified their fight against terrorism through their cooperation. Also, for us, what is a very important question is the repatriation of Tunisian nationals who do not have any right to remain in Germany. This year, we have proceeded with this. I have told the President that we must, moreover, significantly accelerate the repatriation process, and the amount of deportations must increase further.
After spending months here at the Kazer refugee camp, dozens of displaced Iraqis have reached their limit. With frequent shortages and grim winter conditions, many are choosing to leave the camp. Some say they'll return home now that the army has recaptured some areas of Mosul back from Islamic State.
It is better to go back home than to stay here where it is cold and rainy. The tents fall over us. It's not like being home and warm. The heaters they gave us are of poor quality. They leak into the tent. Our areas were liberated and nothing is happening there, thank God.
The United Nations says nearly 91,000 people have been registered as displaced in Mosul, and the World Health Organization says some 70% of the newly displaced people are living in camps that these people say they can no longer bear.
Pioneers from the Republic of Korea are bringing science fiction one step closer to reality. The world's first manned bipedal robot took its first baby steps at a lab outside of Seoul called Method 2. Its creators say the machine has a range of potential applications.
Our robot is planned to be used for entertainment purposes, such as movies or theme parks, and in places where a lot of power but also delicate procedures are needed, such as in industries or construction. Also, I've been getting many requests regarding military usage.
Deutsche Bank, one of the biggest banks in the world, have reached an agreement with the U.S. Justice Department over its sale of toxic mortgages in the run-up to the 2008 crisis. The German bank will pay a total of $7.2 billion, that's 6.8 billion euros. However, the Justice Department had hoped for as much as 14 billion over the misconduct.
Now, the falling value of currency in Egypt is making it difficult for pharmaceutical companies to continue manufacturing. They import raw materials for nearly 60% of what they produce. James Champion reports.
Egypt has a drug problem, a shortage of medicine caused by the falling value of its currency, making some patients uncertain about the future.
I'm afraid of being rejected as a patient in the dialysis center, since they said it will be closed soon. And when I went to Mataraya Hospital, they said they are suffering from a lack of filters, and the hospital will only receive emergencies.
Pharmaceutical companies in Egypt depend on imports of raw materials for almost 60% of production. The fall in value of the Egyptian pound makes buying ingredients more expensive, and there are price caps too, so many products are now unprofitable to produce or import.
A Russian military plane has gone down in the Black Sea. All 92 passengers presumed dead, according to officials. The jet had been en route to Russia's airbase in Syria Sunday morning, carrying dozens of the renowned Red Army Choir, set to entertain troops in the run-up to the new year. The high-profile philanthropist Elizaveta Glinka is also believed to have been on board. The Defence Force says the plane disappeared from radar screens at about 5:30, just minutes after taking off from southern Russia. President Vladimir Putin offering his condolences and ordering an investigation into the cause of the crash.
The typhoon that spoiled Christmas Day in parts of the Philippines has killed at least 6 people, officials say. It also displaced more than 380,000 people in Asia's largest Catholic nation. Dozens of flights were cancelled and ferries barred from sailing, leaving thousands more stranded. The storm was one of the strongest since Typhoon Haiyan left more than 7,000 people dead or missing in 2014.
The Associated Press reports that the furious winter storm that swept into the northern Great Plains on Christmas Day weakened Tuesday, but thousands remained without power in the Dakotas and Michigan. High winds and drifting snow continue to make travel hazardous in the Dakotas, even as vast stretches of highways that had been closed reopened to traffic. The Minoy International Airport, which was closed Monday due to whiteout conditions, reopened Tuesday and was expecting its first flights, incoming and outgoing, late morning. In Michigan, Consumers Energy and DTE Energy said 17,300 customers still had no electricity Tuesday morning.
If anybody
thinks that this is okay or that it's normal, then you're wrong.
It was a very violent Christmas for the city of Chicago this year. Over the holiday weekend, city police said they investigated 27 shooting incidents that left at least 12 people dead and dozens of others wounded. That's double the fatalities the city saw last year over Christmas weekend. According to data compiled by police and the Chicago Tribune, there have been more than 750 homicides in Chicago so far in 2016. The last time the city saw this many killings was during the drug wars in the late 1990s. And perhaps even more frightening, Chicago's number of homicides this year is expected to surpass Los Angeles and New York City's totals combined. Police say they have promising leads in several of the Chicago Christmas weekend incidents, which occurred primarily in areas with historical gang conflicts.
Cheetahs are getting dangerously close to becoming extinct. According to a new report, cheetahs have been driven out of 91% of their historical habitat. Only about 7,000 of the majestic, speedy cats are left in the wild. Cheetahs are currently listed as a vulnerable species on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List, but the new report says the cats should be upgraded to the more urgent endangered classification as soon as possible because their numbers are dramatically declining. The main threats cheetahs face are human-related: conflict with human populations, overhunting, habitat loss, and illegal trafficking. And they encounter these dangerous situations both in and out of conservation areas.
Well, Israel is reacting strongly to the UN Security Council resolution against the continued building of settlements. The resolution passed thanks to an abstention by the United States. CCTV's Jim Spellman is following it.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu continues to blast Friday's UN Security Council vote condemning Israeli settlements. On Sunday, the Prime Minister called in ambassadors from 10 countries that voted for the resolution. That includes China, Russia, the UK, amongst others. Netanyahu personally reprimanded the ambassadors and expressed his anger and dissatisfaction with the vote. And Israel has recalled their ambassadors from New Zealand and Senegal, two countries which co-sponsored the resolution, while cutting all aid to Senegal. Meantime, Israel is reassessing its relationship with the United Nations, but Netanyahu saved his harshest rhetoric for the United States at a cabinet meeting on Sunday. The U.S. abstained from the vote, but in the past has shielded Israel from such votes in the Security Council by vetoing those measures. The Prime Minister accused President Obama of orchestrating the vote.
Over decades, American administrations and Israeli governments have disagreed about settlements, but we agreed that the Security Council was not the place to resolve this issue. We knew that going there would make negotiations harder and drive peace further away. And as I told John Kerry on Thursday, friends don't take friends to the Security Council.
Not only a very beautiful environment here, but it's also a very quiet environment.
At his home in the rainforest along Canada's Pacific coast, Glenn McPherson researches something that science says shouldn't exist. But it does for him. He hears it every night.
When I first moved here, on my first night after the house quieted down, I was actually taken aback at how loud the hum was.
The worldwide hum is usually described as a low-pitched rumble, like a car or truck engine idling nearby, with electronics pulsing. This is a simulation.
We'll be finding out soon enough whether or not the world hum is as prevalent in Asia as it is in the English-speaking world.
Now, after 4 years, his worldwide hum and database project has found nearly 13,000 people on 5 continents who've emailed to say they're hearing something. The number's too large, McPherson says, to dismiss as hysteria, delusion, or belief in the supernatural.
Given that people arrive at this independently, and now looking at the hum map and looking at the distribution of the geographic distribution and the distribution in age and gender, what these people are reporting is something that is certainly real for them.
This paper from the University of Oklahoma 12 years ago links the sound to a U.S. military program that uses VLF, very low frequency radio, and aircraft to communicate with nuclear submarines underwater. It's the first of 4 explanations that Glenn is pursuing.
Second, the hum is the grand accumulation of human activity at low frequency sound and infrasound. Third, that the hum is a terrestrial geological phenomenon. And fourth, the hum might well be an internally generated phenomenon by the body.